Well, let's start first. Just background, who you are, what you do. We'll start there. Why don't we start with you, Alden?
I'm just going to go with Rebecca first. Yes.
We didn't plan any of this out yet.
Okay.
Aldana, please.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Aldana Claudy. I am VP of Zillow Group's Premier Agent Platform, which means I lead this great group of engineers, product managers, designers, and researchers to build out the software solutions that our real estate agent customers and our brokers use. I started off my career as a mechanical engineer, and after working in research and development on jet engine design for Pratt & Whitney, I went back to graduate school and then started my venture into software product management. I've been doing real estate tech for about 13 years, which makes me a bit of a unicorn. So, but I'll stop there. Raquel?
Hi, everyone. I'm Raquel Russell, and I'm the Vice President for Government Relations and Public Affairs. I run Zillow Group's Government Relations and Community Engagement team, where we focus on thought leadership, advocacy, lobbying, as well as our social impact work at Zillow Group. I've been at Zillow now for about 4 years, came from Washington, D.C., where I worked in politics and policy on Capitol Hill and ultimately in the White House for President Obama. And love being here, and I'm excited to be on this panel with 3 of my favorite colleagues.
Likewise. Hi, everyone. My name is Annie Ryan, and I'm the Vice President of Recruiting for Zillow Group. And I have kind of a unique journey and experience. I joined Zillow in 2005 as the first recruiter and one of the first 10 employees. And fast forward now, almost 14 years later, and I have a team of over 100 nationally, and inclusive of recruiting is university recruiting, diversity recruiting, all the programs, so pretty much everything under the umbrella of recruiting. And I'm very, very excited to be here and to talk about allyship and mentorship in particular, because I wholeheartedly believe that the reason I'm on stage today is because of the great allies and mentors that I've had in my past. So I'm happy to be here to talk about it.
I'm Rebecca Bastian. I'm Vice President of Community and Culture at Zillow Group. I was hired there 13 years ago by Annie. And this is actually my second career at Zillow Group. I spent my first 12 years in product leadership. So most recently was VP of product, working closely with Aldana. And then kind of made a big shift following my passions to form this community and culture team. So my new team is focused on our equity and belonging programs, our cultural engagement, and our social impact products. And so I'm thrilled to be up here with these ladies too.
Okay, well, let's start by just defining allyship and what that means to you. Why did you want to talk about it today, and what's the importance of allyship? So I guess that's 3 questions, but what is it, why, and why is it important to you?
Oh, certainly. Between Annie and Raquel and Rebecca, I'm probably the least fluent in the verbiage of allyship. But for me, I would say that we talk about mentors and allies. Mentors are folks who it's very important to be able to provide advice and guidance to folks. You can also be an ally to be able to support and make sure that you can lead them along their career. Lead probably is not the right word, but to help support along their career. For me, it's been very important for my career, because I realized when I first came into the workforce, I worked in a group that was led by a woman engineer. And I thought that was completely, she set the expectation for what my career path could be, and I didn't realize how unique that was. And so I realized it's part of just being visible and being there for my team, like help set that expectation for them going forward. So.
I'll share. I would say what allyship means to me is it is really identifying when there's a lack of equity in a situation, and when we have an opportunity to use, whether it be through inherent or situational, privilege or power advantage you have in a moment, to really advocate for someone to help activate their voice, step in, because it's the right thing to do. And I think why that's important, and where I've seen this, I shared earlier that my career, I owe that in large part to the allies and mentors and advocates I've had along the journey. But if I even just look at the stage right now and I look at the women that I'm sharing the stage with, I could say, first, Raquel, the reason I'm on the stage is because 3 years ago, she and I locked ourselves in a room, and she was the one who helped me identify my voice and find my courage and find my strength to get up on the stage and start talking about my work in diversity and inclusion space. So thank you for that. And Aldana works in San Francisco. I work in Seattle, and leading a recruiting team from afar is very, very difficult and challenging when you can't be with your people all the time and trying to really champion causes and initiatives from afar. And Aldana's been just helping really tirelessly champion the work of my team in recruiting and the work we're doing in the diversity inclusion space. So thank you for that. And then Rebecca has pulled me off the ground when my husband died 5 years ago and helped me not only kind of heal personally, but also professionally and find my strength again to be find my place in my job and in my leadership space. So I think just with that, if that sort of sums up why I'm here and why I think, and whether or not you call this a friendship, are these friends? Yes. Are they advocates? Yes. And allies? Yes. Are they my mentors? Yes. And I think the lines are blurred, especially when you get to know somebody for so long and have that opportunity to work with them. Thank you.
Well, to take it back to more sterile definitions after that. But I think that one of the powers of allyship is that, and you can be an ally to anybody. I think with when we talk about mentorship and sponsorship, that oftentimes comes from a relationship where the mentor or the sponsor is in a higher level in their career and able to use that position to advocate for someone, and those are both really important. But you can be an ally to a peer, right? Or to someone even who's above you in level. It's not necessarily a seniority thing, and so that really makes the power of allyship extremely accessible, which I think is wonderful. And the thing that I would want to highlight too from the discussions we're having now and ones we've had leading up to this panel is that every person that you talk to will have a slightly different definition of what it means to be an ally or a mentor or a sponsor, and what the process is for approaching those relationships and building on them and continuing those relationships. And so I think one of the most important things that we can embrace here is that there isn't a set definition or a set process to follow for those relationships, and it's unique, right? And so leaving ourselves open to forming those different types of relationships in the way that's right for us and the person that we're connecting with is, I think, an important takeaway as well.
Yeah, and I think the through line that you heard in everyone's definition is that an ally is someone who has your back. Right? And however you define it and however the definition expands from there, it starts with that, someone that you know has your back and that will advocate for you.
Awesome. Well, I feel awkward asking this question, but I'm going to ask it. It's part of the questions. But I shouldn't be. But in terms of women to women allyship, I know in some of the prep calls, and then there's a study, I'm looking at my notes, there's a study that was recent release talking about how women feel more supported in the workplace and are often more satisfied in their careers when they have, women mentors and so forth. And that's something that the Zillow Group is putting a lot of work behind and support behind. Can we talk about that in terms of how's that study and what is Zillow Group doing to make that thrive and to make that more of a norm, and also being a role model and champions for other companies to implement similar strategies and solutions around?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Since the beginning, we have had a lot of really amazing women in leadership and just throughout our company. And so, what I think we're seeing now is we're kind of reverse engineering, formalizing a lot of the dynamics that have been there all along. So, for example, I would say that we've always had a culture where women really come together and support each other and have that kind of centered community, and it's happened organically. Now that we're growing and getting bigger, we have a women's network, which is one of our 8 affinity networks, and that really formalizes those relationships and makes it really accessible for new women that are coming into the company, but it's something that really kind of started organically. Likewise, I think we've always had a culture of being very collaborative as opposed to being competitive, and that's just kind of been in our DNA. As we grow, we've created a common language for that, which is part of our core values. And we talk about Zillow Group being a team sport, and we have a set of core values that really creates that common language, so that as we grow and scale and new people come in, they can understand and be part of that. But the reason that that was really easy to create those values and to talk about them is because it was part of our culture organically from the beginning. So I think that centered space for support and the really collaborative, non-competitive nature is something that has really fostered those really strong, powerful relationships amongst women in our company.
And as someone who is newer to the company, the newest, I think, to the company, it is, Annie and Rebecca have been here since the beginning of time from a Zillow Group perspective. Annie has hired most of our senior execs, was the recruiter for them. And I think that, when coming in with fresh eyes to Zillow Group, it was shocking to me how many women were in leadership, and how organic it was, but it also showed up, in my opinion, in some of the policies and programs that even existed when I first started. So, this is a policy or a benefit that I don't need, but I thought was just so fascinating. I started at Zillow Group. I've worked in many places. I've had, been working for 20 years, and we would actually, for female employees who just had a baby and was still breastfeeding, and if they were traveling for work, we would ship their breast milk from wherever they were traveling so they didn't have to deal with TSA and airport security and things of that nature. And I was like, what? What company even thinks of that or does something like that? And it's a company where you have women in leadership at such high levels who are looking out for each other. The story, the kind of backstory of that was a young woman staffer on the communications team had trouble getting her breast milk through TSA. And, the women in leadership heard about that and very quickly put a policy in place. And she felt comfortable speaking up, and obviously our leadership, acted accordingly. And so I think that in addition to the programs that we have, it also shows up in our policies from just that organic, thing that happened 12, 14 years ago.
Right. And I guess I would also say, with our core values, we do live them. I think that this having transparency and act with integrity, you do see in our meetings where we will talk about and the hard conversations. I sat through a product conversation where the question I had about our algorithms was how are we making sure that we are not discriminating against folks? And that was a great conversation. And it's a chance for us to actually ask those hard questions, and I think people feel comfortable doing that.
Yeah, I would say. Well, I won't go back. Thank you. Yes, and I'm glad that's part of the core values, and that's awesome. And what I'm even on this panel, I'm learning is things that but it's one thing to hear it directly from you all at Zillow and I hope the audience is taking this away as well, because we spend so much time talking about the negative stuff, and the solutions are not that hard. It's just make it happen. Right? It's the values and women in leadership, and then the shipping the milk, the breast milk. I know tech companies spend crazy amount of money on let's get all matching leather jackets for the engineering team. Right? But the women ask for jackets. No, we can't get women, jackets for them. But it's this is a simple, practical thing. Let's ship the breast milk. Let's make it easy. We got the money.
Yeah.
They got the billions. Right? But this is what happens when we have women in leadership, things like that. And so anyway, I'll get off my soapbox, but thank you. Thank you all.
So what I have noticed in the tech industry, and I'm sure you all have as well, is that often when we talk about women, it becomes about white women and privileged women. And there's a couple of conversations on Twitter about how companies are touting their diversity on their teams, and it's 50% women, but it's all women who are white and Asian and not underrepresented. They're overrepresented. How do you make sure that you're intentionally looking at intersectionality? Because women are diverse, in terms of race and ethnicity, transgender women, sexual orientation, disability, veterans, a lot of underrepresented women in tech. How do you, age as well, yeah, exactly. How do you build that intentionality around looking intersectionally at women?
I'll address that one.
Okay, go for it.
You ready?
Oh, you want me to do
Yeah,
it?
you go.
Well,
I'll go
I mean,
next.
you're looking at the two African American executives at the company. So, so there's that. There's that.
I'll go after you.
We do it by putting them on the spot.
I think you both need to answer that, just so we're clear.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
I want to hear both.
So one thing I've liked about the Zillow leadership is the continued openness. Like there is an understanding that we need to bring more people into this space, especially in our space. We need diverse voices to make decisions about the things that we're building for the future for housing. So I really appreciate that. There's more work that we have to do. Like I think when we talk about our executive levels and all levels below, like there's definitely more work. But I would. I don't know for Cal or Annie.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, you know, it's so interesting because I look back at just kind of my journey as, you know, thinking through gender and diversity is that I have always lived my life as a Black person, and my focus has been around being a person of color. Like you know, being a woman in my career, being a woman in life was not what I focused on. I mean, I am a person who is African American in the United States. That has been my primary focus. And it really wasn't till in the last 5-6 years that I realized that that I had obstacles just due to my gender, right? Not just as a Black woman, just as a woman, right? And recognizing the importance for women-to-women allyship and women mentors and things of that nature. And I think one of the things that we do really well at Zillow Group, led by Rebecca and her team, is our affinity networks are really set up in a way where we have these affinity networks, but you are strongly encouraged, if not really even somewhat like, you know, driven to not joining just the affinity networks of your affinity, but really being able to cross and be allies across the board, right? So that is something that I think has been encouraged by our community and culture team as we build out our affinity networks and a lot of our equity and belonging work. And so really being able to have people speak to, like, you know, I'm a part of the women's, the women's network at Zillow Group, and being in that group, but also being a part of our Black network and having the conversations in our women's network around issues of women of color and being able to be intentional that way has been really important. I think the only thing I'll touch on that Donna mentioned or alluded to is that I think I'm actually the newest exec on the panel at Zillow Group, but even before that, I felt like I had a voice. I was listened to. I was encouraged to speak up. One of the things that I've always appreciated about Zillow Group is that we have an extremely flat structure, and everyone is encouraged and empowered to use their voice and to speak up. So there were many a times, well before I was a quote-unquote exec at Zillow Group, that I had hard conversations with our execs when it came to race, gender, and diversity issues at Zillow Group. And I was encouraged to do so and never felt like there was any question about, you know, any backlash or anything to that effect. So I think we've always been, as we've gone on this journey of equity and belonging, really, really intentional around our intersectionality conversations. And I think that part of that, if I'm being honest, I think is partly due to the fact that we're newer to this conversation. So intersection, you know, if we had started our diversity and inclusion work 15, 20 years ago, the conversation around intersectionality wasn't as at the forefront as it is now. And so we have that luxury of being able to have that be part and embedded in the early days of our work.
You know, and when I was thinking about my journey, and I think a large part of this conversation for all of us has really been our journey, and especially with this notion and just really embracing intersectionality. You know, for me, as I grew in a leader, I didn't really fully understand really what that meant until I had the time, just I think through the process of like learning and unlearning, really like seeing some of the missed opportunities that I had to be a good ally and a good advocate, and then recognizing that, wow, they really do have, just whether it be through inherent or, you know, maybe some situational, you know, advantages that I have that I need to do, like, I need to do more. And so since I'm in the spirit of storytelling today and sharing stories, I'll just share a quick story. And this is the story for me where I really like resonated what that meant and what that power meant to really step in a way where I could leverage some of those strengths and opportunities that I had. And about 2 years ago, there was an intern who approached me, and the auspice of her approaching me was just, I need help finding a job. And, again, I think this is sort of when you take on somebody, or even when you're thinking about an intern, or if you're thinking about a mentor, you're thinking about an ally, is recognizing sometimes the first conversations that you have, that's not very often, that's not the truth, that's not the real story, right? So when you're thinking about it, it's taking that time to really uncover people's truth and building that level of trust and building that level of kind of confidence to be able to get to people's truth. But what her truth really was that she was trying to make a decision of whether or not she upheld her family traditions and the wishes of her family to be married off and go back home to her place of origin, or to break away from them and start a life here and try to seek work, but really like to completely break away from everything and potentially lose the respect and love of her family. And so she came to me. I don't know why she came to me, but she did. And in that moment, I realized, this is mine. Like, I've got to I can't abandon her right now, and I've got to follow this through. And I really blurred the lines between probably my professional level of responsibility to get involved at that level with someone's personal life decisions, but that's the nature of this work. Is there's no line between what's personal and what's professional. It's all wrapped up into one. And I stayed the course with her through that journey, and she made the choice to stay. And she lost people who she loved very deeply in that journey, but she's starting a new life, and she has a full-time job. And to me, that was, that was my full awakening of the power of intersectionality.
One of my big aha moments, which you touched on, Raquel, is that as a woman, I identify as a woman, and I have over the last about 5 years ago, I realized other women don't necessarily identify as women first. Yeah. Often Black women identify as Black first, and that is a big shift in just and can make you a much better ally when you learn something like that about someone else.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm probably moving to the next question, but it does make me think of, you brought up the affinity networks, which are a great example of allyship, but I actually had a kind of an aha moment too when we were first forming the networks, and I was working on an article that I was writing where I wanted to get input from a lot of women and their experiences. And so I reached out to our women's network asking for stories, and I got some. And then I just, actually on the recommendation of a colleague, sent the same note out to all of our networks. And I got, 10 times as many stories back. And a lot of the women were like, oh, I'm glad you reached out, because I actually haven't, joined the women's network yet, because that's not where I find my core identity. But, there's right? But they were part of other networks that they really did find that centered space in. And so that was a really good intersectionality eye-opening moment for me.
Yeah. Awesome. One of the things we haven't touched on yet is just, how do you make yourself available for as a mentor, as an ally to others? How do you let people know that you're available? And also, there's limitations on what we can all do too. But so how do you navigate that? What do you do?
Well, today on the mentorship side, I participate in a Women in Product Mentoring Circle. And so that is a group of 8 to 10 women who are at different stages of their career. And we meet once a month, and folks share their challenges, and then we provide feedback and suggestions on how they can address those challenges. I would say that I try to, based on my experience, offer some ideas. Many of them are good. Some of them, based on people's looks on their faces, are horrible. But all in all, I definitely try to contribute to that, and I gain a lot back as well. As far as making myself available, I do try to follow the path of, if anyone asks questions or is interested in learning about me, it's always, I'm happy to have coffee, please set up time, and we see where it goes from there. But I do need folks to also take that step to ask, because it is going to be a two-way street as we move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do that as well with setting aside time. I set aside 3 coffees a week generally with people that I've never met before.
She's a robot.
I don't do it robotically though.
No, she doesn't do it robotically. She does it very humanistically. But I don't know how she has the time to do as many as she does. But Rebecca is a champion at this kind of stuff.
It's a true story.
Well, I get a lot out of it too. I mean, I really get a lot out of meeting new people and hearing about different people's experiences, and I find it such a privilege to be able to, share my thoughts or experience in that context as well. And I do find that by just setting the expectation for myself, like I'm going to have 3-hour slots per week that I just kind of time box and they're available. And so then it's not so much to coordinate or to think about. It's just that's what I do, and sometimes I might have to schedule a little further out, but I do make that time, and it's proven to be really valuable.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to just in summary in terms of the panel and the topic and allyship and women to women. What would you want people to walk away from? Like really say, like I hope everybody got to learn a lot in terms of how Zillow. I've learned a lot on this panel, even beyond our prep for the panel as well. But what would you want the audience to walk away from in terms of about you all and about Zillow Group? Like what did take away? Like what is one thing? It's like whether it's like, hey, we have a plan. You want a playbook? You want to copy it? Let us know, or it's not easy, or it can be done, or what do you want people to walk away from about the Zillow Group?
I'll let Rebecca talk about the plan. I would say at an individual level, this idea that being visible, being available is very important to other women. It sets expectations for their career path. It also can help with fellowship and encouragement along the way.
Awesome.
So.
I think what I would say is that culture and the creation of culture starts with your leadership, and it's not something that you can, I think, plan for. I think it's something that's intentional. It's from the soul, from the heart. It's not something you can put in a strategy document and then implement. And that culture and that creation of that culture of allyship is going to then, exponentially grow. And you will see the planning and the programmatic and the benefits come from that. But that culture has to be there, and there has to be that kind of leadership buy-in.
And I would say that we are really trying to walk our talk and follow through with what we say we're doing and what we say we're committed to, but also recognizing that it's a journey and we've got a long way to go, and we are still learning our way into the space and learning our way through it together and learning our way through it with our community.
I'm not actually saying a plan, even though Aldana set me up for that. It's a personal thought. So, I think that we all have the power to lift other people up. And it can be everything from being a shoulder to cry on, to making space for someone in a conversation, to advocating for opportunities for another person. And I think that oftentimes the thing that can hold people back from doing that is a fear that it's a zero-sum game, and that by helping someone else up, that you're going to miss out on an opportunity yourself. And so the thought that I want to leave you with is that it's not a zero-sum game, that we can lift each other up and we can all be better because of it. And so I encourage everyone here to find those opportunities to be a strong ally to others, because it will help us all.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you all. Thank you all for sharing your experiences and being vulnerable and really showing the journey, right? I appreciate all of you. Thank you.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you both of you.